entering the Lycian system, sir.
Slow to 1/4 impulse.
Yes, sir.
Remember when turning on the TV felt like stepping into the future? Not the flashy, over-the-top future filled with explosions, but a quieter, smarter one where every episode asked a question that stuck with you long after the credits roll. A future where a single starship, the USS Enterprise-D, could glide silently through space and somehow make you feel like you were part of the journey. That was Star Trek: The Next Generation. Premiering in 1987, this wasn't just a continuation of a classic, it was a bold reinvention. A show that traded constant action for ideas, that trusted its audience to think, not just watch. At the center of it all was Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard, a captain who didn't need to shout to command respect, a leader who could win battles with words just as easily as with strategy. Surrounding him was a crew that became unforgettable. Jonathan Frakes as William Riker, confident and charismatic. Brent Spiner as Data, searching for what it means to be human. LeVar Burton as Geordi La Forge, seeing the universe in a way no one else could. Marina Sirtis as Deanna Troi, understanding emotions others couldn't. Michael Dorn as Worf, twist between honor and identity. Gates McFadden as Dr. Beverly Crusher, holding everything together when it matters most. And the wildest part? This show didn't even start on a major network. It aired in syndication, meaning it showed up at different times depending on where you lived. No big launch, no guaranteed success. And yet, over 7 seasons and 178 episodes, it became a phenomenon. For many fans, this wasn't just a Star Trek. This was Star Trek. But behind the polished uniforms, philosophical speeches, and futuristic tech things weren't nearly as perfect as they seemed. There were casting battles, creative conflicts, last-minute decisions that changed everything, and moments that almost feel the entire show in a completely different direction. So today, we're going beyond the screen. Here are 15 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up. Number 15. Before Jean-Luc Picard became one of the most respected captains in television history, he almost didn't exist. And the reason? Something surprisingly simple. His hair, or more accurately, the lack of it. When creator Gene Roddenberry imagined the next captain of the Enterprise, he pictured someone closer to the classic mold. A figure with a more traditional action hero appearance. Think bold. Think commanding. Think familiar. So when Patrick Stewart walked into the audition, a serious, classically trained British actor with a completely different energy, it didn't immediately click. In fact, early reactions were skeptical. This wasn't the direction they expected. And that's where things took a strange turn. Studio executives didn't want to give up on Stewart completely, but they weren't ready to embrace his look either. So they proposed a compromise. He should wear a wig. Yes, really. For one of the most important auditions of his career, Patrick Stewart was asked to pretend to have hair. The request was so unusual that arrangements had to be made to get the hairpiece delivered quickly. And for a moment, it looked like that version of the character might actually happen. But then something unexpected happened during the final audition. They asked him to remove it. No disguise, no adjustments, just him. And suddenly the entire perception shifted. Because what they saw wasn't a limitation. It was authority, presence, confidence, gravitas, everything the role actually needed. In that moment, the decision became clear. The wig was gone. And with it, the old idea of what a captain was supposed to look like. What they ended up with wasn't just different, it was iconic. And if you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes stories so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because what's coming next might completely change how you see the show. Number 14. Close your eyes for a second and think about the opening of The Next Generation. That slow build, the sweeping music, the feeling that something important is about to begin. It sounds timeless, like it was created specifically for that moment. But what about behind the scenes? It was a lot more complicated, because the truth is the theme wasn't entirely original. Instead, it was carefully assembled from pieces of Star Trek's past. Part of it came from the original 1960 series, composed by Alexander Courage. Another major section came from Star Trek, the motion picture, scored by Jerry Goldsmith. 2 different eras, 2 different styles, blended into one. And somehow, it worked perfectly. But that's not even the strangest part. There was an original theme written specifically for the show. A composer created something brand new, something designed to define this new generation. And at the very last moment, it was rejected. The producers decided to go with familiarity instead, a decision that could have easily backfired. But instead, it created something instantly recognizable, something that connected the past to the present without saying a word. And then there's one tiny detail that most people never notice: that iconic whoosh sound as the Enterprise flies past the screen. It wasn't created with advanced sound design. It wasn't generated by a machine. It was made by a person. A simple, human-made sound effect that became part of one of the most recognizable openings in TV history. It's a reminder that sometimes, even in a story about the future, the magic comes from surprisingly simple places. Number 13. Few things in Star Trek are as instantly recognizable as the transporter. A character steps onto the platform, a glow surrounds them, and within seconds they're gone. It feels seamless, futuristic, almost believable. But if you go back to when the Next Generation was being made, the technology to create that effect digitally just wasn't there yet. So the production team had to get creative, and their solution was surprisingly low-tech. Instead of relying on computers, they built the effect physically, using water, light, and tiny reflective particles. The team would fill a container with liquid and add materials like glitter or metallic dust. Then they'd shine strong lights through it while disturbing the water to create movement. Sometimes they even introduced bubbling elements to give it more life. What they captured on camera wasn't artificial. It was real motion, real reflections, real randomness. And that's exactly why it worked so well. Because no two transporter effects ever looked exactly the same. Every single one had subtle differences, tiny variations that made the illusion feel alive. Once that footage was combined with shots of the actors, the result was something that looked far more advanced than it actually was. It wasn't just an effect, it was a clever illusion. And it proves something important. You don't always need cutting-edge technology to create something convincing. Sometimes you just need creativity. So by now, it's already clear some of the most iconic parts of Star Trek. The Next Generation didn't come from massive budgets or perfect planning. They came from last-minute decisions, creative risks, and sometimes just figuring things out on the fly. But what if I told you some of the stories themselves weren't even new? Number 12. When people think about the Next Generation, they imagine a bold leap forward. New crew, new ship, new era, and that's true at least on the surface. But what about behind the scenes? A surprising amount of the show's foundation came from something that never even made it to air. Years before TNG existed, there was another project in development, an attempt to bring Star Trek back to television. He was ambitious. It had scripts ready, sets were being planned, and then it was canceled. Just like that. But here's the thing about creative work. Ideas don't just disappear, they wait. So when the Next Generation began production nearly a decade later, those unused scripts and concepts were still sitting there, fully developed, just waiting for a second chance. And the producers took advantage of that. Instead of starting entirely from scratch, they went back and revisited those ideas, reshaping them to fit the new crew of the Enterprise-D. In some cases, entire story structures were reused, characters were adjusted, details were updated. But at their core, these stories had already been imagined years earlier. Now, that might sound like cutting corners, but in reality, it helped the show survive some of its most difficult moments, especially during times when new scripts were hard to produce quickly. And here's the surprising part. Some of those adapted stories turned into memorable episodes. Which raises an interesting question. Would those ideas have ever seen the light of day without the Next Generation? Or did they need a new crew and a new era to finally work? Either way, it's a reminder that sometimes the future is built from what was left behind. Number 11. The Enterprise-D looked like the future. Clean lines, bright lighting, a completely different aesthetic from the darker, more industrial look of earlier sci-fi. Everything about it felt new. But if you had been standing behind the scenes, you might have recognized more than you expected. Because the truth is, the Next Generation was incredibly resourceful when it came to building its world. Instead of creating everything from scratch, the production team reused and repurposed materials from earlier Star Trek projects, props, set pieces, even structural elements. If something could be adapted, it was, and sometimes those reused pieces were hidden in plain sight. Parts of older sets were flipped, rearranged, or redesigned just enough to look completely different on camera. To the audience, it felt like a brand new universe. But to the people building it, it was more like a carefully assembled puzzle. This wasn't just about saving money, although that was definitely part of it. It was about efficiency. Television production moves fast. Budgets are tight. And when you're creating an entire galaxy week after week, you learn quickly how to make the most of what you have. What's fascinating is that this approach adds an unexpected layer of continuity. Even if viewers didn't consciously notice it, pieces of Star Trek's past were literally still present in this new era. It's almost poetic. A show about the future quietly carrying pieces of its own history forward. Number 10. When you think of Data, one of the first things that comes to mind is its uniqueness. An android trying to understand humanity. curious, logical, always searching. But early on, the writers had a very different idea for how to explore that journey. Instead of introducing conflict, they considered introducing connection. The original concept involved another android, similar in design, but created with a different purpose. This character wasn't meant to challenge Data. She was meant to complement him, a companion, a potential relationship. The idea was to explore questions like, can artificial beings form emotional bonds? Can something programmed learn to feel something real? On paper, it made sense. It was thoughtful. It was philosophical. But there was a problem. It was also predictable, and that's where Brent Spiner stepped in. Looking at the concept, he realized something important. If Data simply learned about humanity through connection, the story might feel safe. But if he was forced to confront something darker, something closer to himself, but fundamentally different, that would create tension. That would create drama. So instead of a companion, the idea shifted. What if the second android wasn't kind? What if he wasn't curious? What if he had everything Data didn't? Emotions, ambition, even arrogance, but none of his restraint? That single change transformed the entire concept. Suddenly, instead of a gentle exploration, you had a conflict, a mirror image that forces Data to question not just what he could become, but what he might have been. And just like that, one of the show's most compelling dynamics was born. It's a perfect example of how one creative decision can completely reshape a character's legacy. Because sometimes the most interesting stories don't come from harmony. They come from contrast. By now, you've probably noticed something. A lot of what made Star Trek The Next Generation work wasn't carefully planned from the beginning. It was shaped by unexpected changes, missed opportunities, last-minute pivots, and decisions that could have gone completely differently. And nowhere is that more obvious than in this next story because it involves one of the biggest what-if moments in the show's history. Number 9. Every now and then, a character appears in a show and feels so perfectly cast, it's hard to imagine anyone else in the role. But sometimes, the truth behind that casting is completely different. There was an episode of The Next Generation built around a very specific kind of character. Fast-talking, unpredictable, full of energy. The kind of person who could walk into a room and instantly change its atmosphere. The writers had someone very particular in mind. An actor known for quick thinking, improvisation, and a unique ability to balance humor with depth. The role was shaped around that energy, designed to feel spontaneous, almost chaotic. And for a moment, it looked like it might actually happen. The actor was interested. The production team was on board. Everything seemed aligned. Until reality stepped in. Scheduling conflicts, a major film commitment, the timing just didn't work, and just like that, the plan changed. Now here's where things get interesting. When a role is written with a specific performer in mind, replacing them isn't easy. You're not just recasting a character, you're rethinking how that character works. The rhythm changes, the tone shifts, the entire performance has to be reinterpreted. And yet the actor who ultimately took the role didn't try to imitate what might have been. Instead, they brought something different. Something that still captured the essence of the character, but in a way that felt natural and grounded. And somehow it worked. The episode became memorable not because of what it could have been, but because of what it became. It's one of those rare situations where a missed opportunity didn't hurt the final result. It just feels it in a different direction. And if you didn't know the story behind it, you'd never guess anything had changed at all. Number 8. Imagine this for a second. You're sitting at home watching your favorite show, and instead of just wondering what might happen next, you actually have a chance to write it. It sounds impossible today, but for a period of time, that's exactly what Star Trek The Next Generation allowed. At a time when most TV productions were tightly controlled, this show did something almost unheard of. It opened the door to the public. No connections required, no industry background needed, just an idea and the ability to put it on paper. Writers from all over, fans, aspiring creators, people with completely different careers started submitting scripts, thousands of them, every single year. Now, you might assume most of these were ignored, but that's not what happened. The production team actually took this seriously. Scripts were reviewed, evaluated, considered. Of course, not all of them made it through, but some did, and those stories didn't just appear on screen, they became part of the show's legacy. Think about that. A series set in the future shaped in part by the very people watching it. It created a unique relationship between the audience and the story, because suddenly the line between viewer and creator wasn't so clear anymore. And even though this kind of open submission wouldn't last forever, eventually replaced by stricter industry rules, it left behind something rare. Proof that sometimes the audience understands a story just as deeply as the people making it. Number 7. From the outside, being part of a major TV series looks like a dream. Steady work, recognition, a chance to be part of something bigger. But behind the scenes, the reality can be a lot more complicated, especially when opportunities start to overlap. During the early years of The Next Generation, one of the younger cast members found himself in exactly that situation. On one hand, he had a regular role on a growing series. On the other, a chance to step into something entirely different. A film project, a major opportunity, the kind that could open new doors. But there was a problem. The schedules didn't line up, and when he tried to figure out a way to do both, he was told something important. That his presence on the show was essential, that the upcoming work required him, that it couldn't move forward without him. Faced with that information, the choice seemed clear. He stayed, passed on the film, committed to the series. But then something unexpected happened. When production moved forward, it turned out his role wasn't as central as he had been led to believe. Scenes were adjusted, the story continued, without him being as involved as expected, and that realization hit hard. Because it wasn't just about a missed opportunity, it was about trust. In an industry where timing is everything, one decision can shape the path of an entire career. And in this case, it became a turning point. Not immediately, but over time. It changed how he viewed his role on the show, how he approached future opportunities, and ultimately whether he wanted to stay. It's one of those behind-the-scenes moments that reminds you, even in a series about teamwork, exploration, and progress, the real challenges aren't always happening on screen. So far, we've seen how The Next Generation was shaped by unexpected choices, missed chances, creative risks, and decisions that could have easily gone in another direction. But everything we've talked about up to this point, it was still manageable. Because now we're stepping into the part of the story where things nearly fell apart completely. Number 6. When people look back at The Next Generation, they usually remember the later seasons. The strong storytelling, the character development, the confidence. But the truth is, it didn't start that way. Not even close. Behind the scenes, the first season was incredibly unstable. Scripts were constantly being rewritten, sometimes at the last possible moment. Writers came in and quickly left. New ideas were introduced only to be changed overnight. There was no consistent rhythm, no solid foundation. And at the center of it all was a creative rule that sounded good in theory, but caused serious problems in practice. The idea was simple. In the future, humanity has evolved. People don't argue the way they used to. They don't emotionally clash. They work together. It's an optimistic vision. But for storytelling, it created a major issue because drama needs tension. It needs disagreement, conflict, opposing perspectives. Without that, scenes start to feel flat. And that's exactly what happened. Writers struggled to create engaging stories when the main characters weren't allowed to truly challenge each other. Everything felt restrained, careful, almost too perfect. And that wasn't the only challenge. Behind the scenes, scripts that had already been approved would suddenly be changed, sometimes without warning. Entire scenes rewritten, altered dialogue, storylines. Shifted. Imagine spending days or weeks working on something only to find it completely different the next time you see it. It created frustration, confusion, and eventually a revolving door of writers trying and failing to adapt to the environment. For a while, it seemed like the show might not find its jogging at all, but then something changed. As time went on, the strict rules started to loosen, new voices stepped in, and slowly the series began to evolve into something stronger, more dynamic, more engaging, more real. It didn't happen overnight, but once it did, that's when The Next Generation truly became the show people remember. Number 5. Some of the most iconic characters in television history are carefully planned from the beginning. Others exist for a much simpler reason. They were needed at the last minute. When the pilot episode of The Next Generation was being put together, there was a problem. Not with the story itself, but with its length. It wasn't long enough. For a major premiere, that was an issue. The network wanted something bigger, more substantial, an event. But the existing storyline didn't have enough material to stretch that far. So what's the solution? Add something new. Something that could run alongside the main plot. Something flexible enough to appear, disappear, and reappear as needed. And that's how one of the most memorable characters in the entire series was created. An all-powerful being, unpredictable, challenging, impossible to ignore. A character who doesn't just interact with the crew, but judge them, questions them, push them. At first, it might have seemed like a temporary addition, a way to fill space, but something unexpected happened. Audiences responded. The character stood out not just because of the concept, but because of the performance. There was a presence, a sense that every appearance mattered even if the character wasn't directly tied to the main plot. And because of that, what started as a practical solution became something much bigger. The character kept coming back, again and again, evolving each time, becoming more complex, more interesting, more essential. It's one of the best examples of how limitations can lead to creativity, because without that original time constraint, this character might never have existed at all.
Number 4.
When Patrick Stewart first became part of the Next Generation, he didn't see it as a long-term commitment. In fact, he expected the opposite. At that point in his career, he was known for his work in theater.
Serious performance, classical training, a completely different world from television. So when the opportunity came along, it wasn't an obvious choice. There was uncertainty, risk, and a very real possibility that the show wouldn't last. But eventually he agreed, not because he was convinced it would succeed, but because of what he believed would happen instead. The expectation was simple. The show would run briefly, he would earn a solid paycheck, and then return to his previous work. That was the plan. And for a while, he treated it that way, living simply, not settling in fully, keeping things temporary, because in his mind, it wouldn't last. But then something started to shift. The episodes kept coming. The audience started growing. The show didn't fade, it expanded. And at a certain point, it became impossible to ignore. This wasn't temporary anymore. It was becoming something significant, something lasting. And that realization changed everything. Because what started as a short detour turned into one of the most defining roles of his career. It's almost ironic. The actor who expected the least from the show ended up becoming one of its most iconic figures. At this point, one thing is clear: Star Trek: The Next Generation didn't become legendary because everything went right. It became legendary because so many things almost went wrong, and somehow it still worked. And the final 3 facts? They might be the most surprising of all.
Number 3.
It's hard to imagine the Enterprise-D without Worf, the quiet intensity, the sense of honor, the constant struggle between identity and duty. He's not just part of the crew, he's essential to it. But here's the truth, he almost didn't exist. In the early vision for the Next Generation, the goal was to move forward completely. No familiar alien races, no connections to the past, a clean break. The idea was to show a brand new galaxy untouched by what came before, and that meant leaving behind some of the most recognizable elements of the original series, including the Klingons. So for a time, there was no place for Worf. But as the show developed, something became clear. Cutting ties completely might not be the best way to show progress, because sometimes the strongest way to show change is to show how things have evolved. And that's where the idea shifted. Instead of removing the past, why not transform it? A Klingon, once an enemy, now serving aboard a Federation starship, not as a visitor, not as an outsider, but as part of the crew. That single decision added depth instantly. It told a story without needing an explanation. And then came the casting. Michael Dorn approached the role with seriousness and restraint. He didn't treat Worf as a background character. He treated him as someone with history, with values, with something to prove. And that presence changed everything. The role grew, scene by scene, season by season, until the character, who wasn't even supposed to exist, became one of the most important figures in the entire franchise. Sometimes, the best additions are the ones no one planned.
Number 2.
Before joining the Next Generation, Whoopi Goldberg was already a major name. Successful film, critical recognition, a career that didn't need television. So when production was underway for the series, no one expected her to be involved at all. But something interesting happened. Instead of waiting to be approached, she made the first move. She reached out, expressing interest in being part of the show. And the response? They didn't believe it. They thought it was a joke, a prank. Because why would someone at that level want to join a syndicated sci-fi series? It didn't make sense, at least not from a business perspective. But this wasn't about business. It was personal. Years earlier, as a child, she had seen something on TV that stayed with her. A character who represented possibility, who showed that the future could look different. And now, she had a chance to be part of that same universe. Once it became clear she was serious, everything changed. A role was created specifically for her. Not just any role, but one that felt unique. A character who didn't operate within the usual structure. Someone who observed more than she spoke. Who understood things others didn't and brought a different kind of perspective to the crew. Her presence added something subtle but powerful. A different energy, a different voice. And the fact that she chose to be there not out of necessity but out of passion, it made it even more meaningful. It's a reminder that sometimes the biggest opportunities don't come from being asked. They come from stepping forward.
Number 1.
Behind the scenes of any long-running show, there are disagreements, creative differences, conflicting ideas, moments where things don't line up. But sometimes those moments turn into something much bigger. During the early stages of The Next Generation, one cast member found herself at the center of that kind of situation. Gates McFadden, who played Dr. Beverly Crusher, wasn't just another character on the show. She brought intelligence, calm authority, a presence that grounded the crew. But behind the scenes, there were tensions, concerns about how the character was being written, questions about the direction of certain stories. And not all of those concerns were welcomed. Eventually, things reached a breaking point, and she was written out of the show. Just like that. For viewers, it was surprising. For the cast, it was noticeable. Because removing a character like that doesn't just change the story, it changes the dynamic, the balance, the feeling of the entire show. A new character was introduced to fill the role, and while the performance brought something different, it wasn't quite the same. Something was missing, and people noticed, not just the audience, but the cast as well. Because by that point, the show had started to find its identity, its rhythm, its sense of connection, and removing one part of that disrupted the whole, so something unusual happened. Instead of quietly moving forward, there was pushback. Support from within the cast, support from the audience. A growing sense that this wasn't the right decision. And eventually, that pressure made a difference. The character returned, and with that return, something clicked back into place. The dynamic felt complete again. The balance was restored. And from that point on, the show moved forward with a stronger foundation. It's one of those rare moments where a behind-the-scenes conflict didn't just create tension, it led to a correction, and in the end, made the show better.
Bonus.
So when you look back at Star Trek, The Next Generation, it's easy to see the final result. The polished episodes, the iconic characters, the legacy it left behind. But what makes it truly fascinating is everything that almost stopped it from getting there. The casting decisions that nearly went the other way. The creative risks that could have failed. The behind-the-scenes conflicts that could have changed everything. And yet, through all of that, the show didn't just survive. It became something unforgettable. A series that didn't just explore space, but explored ideas, identity, morality, what it means to move forward. And maybe that's why it still resonates today. Because beneath the science fiction, it was always about something real. Now we want to hear from you. Which fact surprised you the most? Was there something you already knew or something completely new? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this brought back memories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the shows that define a generation. Until next time, we'll see you out there.